Take me to another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land. Magical, magical land. To another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical, magical land. Today's guest is the Disruptor-In-Chief. He is an entrepreneur and has founded and co-founded over 10 companies. He has advised and mentored dozens of startups, scale-ups, and associations. Please welcome to the show, Seth van der Meer. Hey, Seth, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hey, Jens. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Good, perfect. Yeah, sun is shining. There's nothing better in Germany right now.
Yeah, I know. I'm not too far from you here in the Netherlands, and it's also great weather, great sun. So yeah, that also makes today good.
Yes, cool. So before we go into your entrepreneurial journey, I think there are a lot of things, nuggets we will figure out, and innovation, of course. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What is your story?
Wow. Yeah. So let's start a little bit back. So my name is Seth van der Meer. I currently work at a company called Seths Digital Services, but I have a long history in sort of trying to find new niches in the market and growing business around it. I have a long way back. So I started somewhere in the mid 90s where I was still at university, discovering the internet. I was, I think, one of the first that sort of in my department had access to a computer, and especially to the World Wide Web. So I wanted to do a lot with it, but I was still studying, so I had to make some decisions there, and I wanted to become starting up something for myself. In the end, I didn't at that time, so I worked at an internet company for a couple of years. We were building websites, and then I think it was in 2000 or a little earlier, where I came back with the idea of starting my own company, which I did with a friend, and it was a complete failure, not because of the idea, but just because of the timing. So we had this situation with the internet bubble bursting, Wall Street, we had to rethink our plans, and in the end, we did not really start that company. But I was already on that path of, doing my own thing. So I became a freelancer, and then I think 2 years later, I found a couple of friends, and we started working together. And eventually, in 2004, I started the company that I'm currently still, again, I would say, working for, which is called Kelp, which was basically a company that helps people to set up their mobile phone. At that time, it was quite new, right? So how to get your phone connected to the internet. And then, did that for a couple of years, then came into the world of video games, set up a video game business development platform with an incubator and a big developer festival, and tried to sort of shape the entrepreneurial, entrepreneurial platform, entrepreneurial infrastructure, I could say, for young video game developers. That was in the city of Utrecht, in the center of the Netherlands. And there I met some people that were also the owner of some of the shopping malls in Europe, one of the larger ones in the Netherlands called Hoogkaterijnen, but also shopping centers around Europe. And I thought that was an interesting combination, that sort of virtual versus the real world, and how is that going to change how people are going to entertain, are going to shop, are going to, spend their time, basically, because you can spend 10 hours a day on a computer, or you can spend 10 hours a day in a shopping center. So that was an interesting time, and I learned a lot about that specific industry. Now, I did that for a couple of years in various positions, but always sort of in that innovation scene. So trying to come up with new innovations, how to get people to the shopping center, how to motivate them, how to reward them with digital points and stuff like that. And at some point, that shopping center company was being sold to another one, and I sort of took out that business and continued with that for a couple of years. In the meantime, I had a few businesses on the side. things happening, but that was sort of the main thing that I kept on doing. And then I think somewhere in 2017, 18, I came back to where I am, where I started almost, the company that I just told you about, Kelp, which was by then acquired by Sykes. And I got to work on a completely sort of new area, a new department that we wanted to grow, which was again all around innovation and finding new markets and developing new products and new propositions. So, yeah, sort of a quick rundown of the events of the last 20, yeah, even a little bit more than 20 years.
Yeah, interesting stories, and we will dig definitely more into the different parts of the story. And one thing and that's maybe as well for those who are listening, where we met was quite funny. You have been advisor for IKEA Centres as well from an innovation perspective, and that's how we connected when I was still in the corporate world a couple of years back. It's quite funny how we meet again and then discuss still innovation topics. So digging into your journey, how was it starting your first company, coming from a corporate setup and then go into your own business?
Well, so basically the first, so I think I had a bit of luck that the company that I would say I started with, if that's correct to say, but at least one of my first real employers. It was in the late 90s, and it was kind of a startup environment, right? Because it was the internet, and I think there were 15 people, working when I started, and when I left, we had 60 or 70 people. So we grew like 200% in 2 years' time. So I was already sort of like in that mood of everything's possible, grow your own beliefs, your own dreams. So and very multitasking. So because you were a small company, you had to do everything from project management to account management to consulting to God forbid even doing some programming in HTML myself, right? So really these all these things were there. And I think that shaped at least it shaped the fundamentals that I needed to be confident that I could do it on myself, that I could be like a real. So it can be you can do it without having a proper job before you start. But I think those 3 years almost that I spent there gave me a little bit more depth and a little bit more confidence that I was able to start it. So. And then when I started it in 2000, then it failed because we had backing. We needed financial backing, so we went to investors, and we had 2 investors that were willing to back us up. So we were like really ready to go. And then this Wall Street crash and the internet bubble burst. So that didn't stop me from starting that entrepreneurial journey. I was ready for. I knew, okay, this company is not going to be it, at least not in the short term. But because I made that decision in my head, I just took that step. And yeah, I think that was the best choice. Well, not in my life, but at least one of the best choices in my life, right? So it was really sort of it helped me a lot in my personal life, in my development, in becoming more well. Also, I think a bit more aware of my own capabilities, and it helped, of course, in just a lot of fun that I had from that point onwards. And not always fun, when you're an entrepreneur, you're also encounter difficult times where you have to make decisions that you just don't want to do because you don't want to kill your own babies, but you have to do sometimes. That was I think that sort of, even though that company did not really succeed, I still started, and then just as a freelancer to do my own things and find my own way.
Yeah. How was it at that time? So today, a lot of, let's say, if you start a business and you fail, a lot of people from the outside who are not into an entrepreneurial way of thinking are saying, hey, you have failed as a person. How was it at that time? How did it feel for you?
Yes, I when I look back at it, I think I had, well, maybe you don't need a lot, but I had some sort of like, I had, um, I was ready uh, for myself long before I took the decision to really do it. So I think I spent half a year sort of debating within myself, should I
Mm.
do this before we went out to really try to start a business. So um, by that time, I already had some context. I started sort of a network of people that I knew from the couple of years that I worked before, just people that I met in that job. And so when we could not start it up, when we had to say, okay, let's stop this company. Um, the good thing is I had a network that I could immediately sort of call and say, okay, you know, we were doing this. We met a couple of weeks ago. Probably we will not be doing it, but you know, I'm looking for something. Do you have like, you know, not a job, but do you know somewhere I can do an assignment, or is
Mm.
there, you know, some things that need to be done? So, um, and I do not come from an entrepreneurial background. So my mother was a school teacher. My father didn't even have a job, so I did not really have like that sort of background of being an entrepreneur. But I felt supported. I think that's. I mean, if you have lots of people talking you down, I think it's more difficult. But in my
Yeah.
case,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then you founded a business, which of course at that time you didn't know that it is still existing in 2021.
no.
So did you start that business with the mindset of that you will sell it one day, which you did then to the American business, or was it more that you built your dream and you will be working in that forever? How was it when you started out?
Yeah, so I was like, I think when this all happened, it was 2004. So I was sort of already 4 years on that path of doing my own things, a couple of years on my own. Then I found a few friends to work with together. Um, and I think because I already found those friends, I had sort of in my mind, I thought, let's start this business as something to sell at some point.
Hmm.
Um, but that's sort of like looking back. I think at that point I knew we would have to invest time and money in it to get it started. It wasn't something that I had some passion for, so it was something that I'd been working on before as well. It was in the telecoms industry, which in that time was a thriving industry. Um, it had to do with user experience, which is something that I have a lot of interest in. I really like to provide good user experiences. So when I did it, it felt like, hey, this is, I love this, and I sort of had to also at some point make a choice between continuing that and saying goodbye to all my other projects, or do it as a project on the side together with the other founder.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was a struggle for some time, because I spent lots of times on it, and I had lots of fun, and I also had lots of difficult decisions. So at some point, I had to make that sort of choice of letting it go. But I was not really aware of that when I started it. I started it as, oh yeah, we can do it, and we'll see where it goes,
Yeah.
and hopefully we can sell it for a good price someday. But we didn't really know. I think later on I became more aware of that. It's that you sort of you have a choice, or at least you think you have a choice. But at that time, I think I just rolled in. I think let's try this. Just
Yeah.
go behind that idea and see where it goes.
Yeah. And then later on, I mean, you in the end ended up in selling it. How was that? How was that happening, and how was it feeling as an entrepreneur? It's basically, like you said, it's like your baby, because you have been part of it the whole time, and then you're giving it away, and someone else is taking over. How was that?
Yeah. So for me, that point came earlier, because um, I think I sold my part of the business roughly 2 years before it was sold to the American
Okay.
mother company. So I was not in that process, but I did what I was in the process like 2 years earlier of, do I want to still continue with it? Because, like I said, I at some point made the choice to spend time on other projects as well, and started new businesses as well. So I think after a year or 7, 8, I had to make the choice. Can I invest more time and money in Kelp, or do I just have to sell it to other shareholders who are able to do either a financial or not some other capital investment? Um, and that was for me. It was not. Yeah, that was difficult because I had this idea like I want to keep on to my shares, but I also knew that the company needed funding, and I was not able at that time to do it financially, and I could only do it in person. But then I had other um, projects and companies that I'd started up, and that also took a lot of attention. So that was difficult because I was sort of hoping to always hold on to these shares until the big day came, and I sold it like 2 years before the big day came, still for a reasonable price, but yeah, could have been better.
So and now you're working again for that company.
Yeah, that
How
was a
did that
thing.
happen? How did that happen?
Um, yeah, that's. I think the story behind that is that um, I was sort of I was working in this retail industry for quite some time, and I had a lunch or a dinner with the co-founder of Kelp, and he said, "Well, what are you doing today? How's it going?" And we had this sort of random chat about all kinds of things. And I knew that, of course, I knew the company was sold to a larger American enterprise. And he said, "Well, I will be going at some point, right? I have done this, I've sold the shares, and I want to do new things. Um, but and I'm not very well at working in a more corporate environment." He was a very entrepreneurial guy. So I had done that before. I worked, not only as the advisor to IKEA, but also to other larger companies. And I felt like, there's some interesting things here because this company needs to reinvent itself. It has been doing the same thing for the last 10, 12 years. And now new propositions need to be made, new markets need to be found and explored. Um, and the good thing is, I could do that with money. And that sounds stupid, but I've always funded my own projects. And now, for
Yeah.
the first time, sort of, I was able to come in a position where I could develop a market and develop new propositions without having to think of income all the time because the income's stable now. And now I can really focus on developing a market and growing a business and see if I'm able to grow an industry or at least a company and have it grow like 15 to 20% a year, which is, I would say, a challenging but a very interesting new project for me to not just focus on, okay, can I start something from scratch from 0 to 1,
Mm.
but can I get it from 10 to 50, right? And that's for me, it was a new challenge. Never been in that sort of corporate environment, really deep into it for a long time. I've always been my own boss except for the first couple of years. So that was that's also, you need an entrepreneurial spirit. Sometimes they call it an intrapreneur. I don't really know if I agree with that term, but at least you need that entrepreneurial spirit. You need to have a role where you'll be able to still sort of have enough detachment from the organization, um, have people around you that do the political stuff, so you don't have to go into that, but you can really just be bold and just shout out things and go directions without people looking over your shoulder all the time. And that's
Mm.
that's really what I have been doing over the last 3 years, which is a completely new adventure for me.
Love it. So talking about innovation, you have touched it already. How do you describe innovation for yourself?
Yeah, so innovation is like there are lots of definitions. So I usually look at it from the perspective of wherever I see friction in processes. So um, it could be like, um, for instance, why do I get all these updates from packages that going to arrive at my door, but it's so hard to just give me a time, right? Um, that could be one example. And that's a personal thing. And then I start thinking, and not all. Well, I think most of the time I do nothing with it. It's just sitting in my head, thinking, "Oh, this could be done in a better way." So friction is an important point. Is there a friction that irritates an end user, or that sort of dissatisfied an end user? And that's a starting point. Um, And then there's another input that's more like, what do I see happening around me? So what are the trends that I see, and how do those trends influence different industries? Um, so, for instance, when I was working in retail, and you saw, of course, e-commerce coming up, but I found the gaming trend much more interesting
Mm-hmm.
because those were really immersive worlds. And I saw that retail trying to sort of come up with all kinds of activities and events, not scalable at all. And I saw that virtual world that was yeah, really immersing you into worlds where you could spend hours and hours. And so for me, that was like, hey, I see this gaming trend, I see retail, and how can they ever um, come together, and what would that mean in terms of what kind of innovations can you think of when you combine these things? So it's both things. So is something not going right, and do you see trends in different areas that you can apply to that industry where things are not going smooth or not going in without any friction? But that's where I usually sort of start to get curious, where I start to think of ideas, and where innovation starts for me. And I think with that, it also implies that it's difficult to look back and say, you know, how can I research whether this is actually going to happen, right? Because there's not like tons of material that will prove you right.
Yeah.
There might be material that will prove you wrong, but material that will prove you right, evidence hard to find. So for a part, you're sort of riding a gut feeling wave, and then when you go along, you try to sort of validate your assumptions, find evidence, and yeah, that for me is innovation. So having those two inputs and then just go for it, and don't dare to fail. Just try to make stuff out of it.
Yeah. And then you have been advising companies from small to large
Yeah.
on innovation topics and most probably other topics as well. But if we focus on the innovation part of it, what are the things that are working in corporations when it comes to innovation, and what have you seen is not really working in corporations?
Well, I think in terms of larger corporations, I mean, so I just spoke about daring to risk, daring to fail. I think that's of course in larger corporations, especially ones that are listed somewhere. Um, yeah, the first thing you get confronted with is, of course, all the people that are risk averse that say, well, can you prove it? How much will we earn with it? How much damage can we get when it goes wrong? So that's a sort of a continuous force that you always have to address. Like, okay, we need to find a safe environment where things can go wrong without having the CFO or someone else looking over your shoulder, or legal, or and telling you, well, you cannot do this. That's sort of a thing that I've always found in larger corporations, to find a place where you can have some sort of artificial freedom, right? You're never completely free in a large corporation. You can forget that, but you can find that. Or, and that's the other path that I've been on with, is if a company is sort of willing to set people like really free. Again, this still is in some sort of boundaries, and they don't ask a specific deliverable. They just give you time. And I think that was when I started working for the company called Corio, which is now part of Clubhouse, which was the owner of shopping malls. One of the first large assignments that I did there was just half a year of research free without any deliverable that we wanted to get out of it. We were able to set up a lab and just experiment. That was sort of in my opinion, one of the best settings for a company, for a larger corporation, to throw out something and just see what happens, knowing that that they were not able to get any better answers from any of the large consultancies because everyone was in the dark about developments, retail versus e-commerce versus the future of shopping centers in this case. So I think that was one way of trying to get this sort of room, and you don't have a deliverable. That's the most optimal. You see sometimes that companies then start like an incubator platform, so they start to fund small small companies, students. And I know there are successful examples, but it's also difficult because you immediately come into this sort of financial dependency that looks great in the beginning, but at some point you have to sort of deliver something back. And so as long as you don't have to deliver like a real specific result, but more things like I want to get an update every 2 weeks, or I want to see an experiment every month. That's for me the most ideal way of innovating in a larger corporation.
If you then take this to the startup world, you're advising startups as well. So what are you advising them? Is it also innovation, or is it more like their business development topics and so on?
Yeah, that depends, of course, on I've done both. So done both, but when I advise them on more business kind of things, I do not really advise them on how to set up your business or whatever. It's more like helping them not to lose their focus, but also to be willing to give up things that they think are valuable, right? So you often see they start with an idea and then they go completely for that idea, and they forget to look around to check whether there's any demand for what they want, whether there's any sort of you don't need, like I said, you don't need proof, but at least if you're developing something like, for instance, for an end user, for a consumer, or also for a business, you want to find out, is there anyone remotely interested in the idea that I'm now developing? So one of the first things I do, just go outside and don't spend too many hours inside your office or inside your lab or whatever you have. You need to spend a significant time of your business development, of your product development, with speaking with possible future customers, possible future partners, possible future investors, everyone that sort of can help you shape that idea and validate it to be sure that once you're ready, there's a chance you find someone who's actually interested in what you do. Unless you're an artist, right? Then you can do whatever you want. But if you're not an artist, if it's not your hobby, then you need to find someone who at some point is willing to pay you money for what you're making.
Yeah.
So I think that's the business advice that I usually give to them. From an innovation perspective, it is more like, okay, there's some functional things on what is your product or your service, what is it going to do? how is this better than? I had this rule once, and this is not so much about better, but I had this rule once where it said, someone said, well, we're going to deliver this service and we're going to do it for half the price of our competitors, right? And they thought that was innovating. And I said, well, if you want to be innovating, you have to say half the price and then cut that in half again, right? Because then you're disruptive. If you want to be like, you need to be not just 20, 30, 40% better. You need to be almost 100% better than your competitor to, especially if your competitor is like a large corporation or established or whatever. So then I usually challenge those companies on these kind of things, right? So you have a good idea, you're 50% better, now make it 100% better. You can do it 50% cheaper, now do it 100% cheaper, right? You have to challenge yourself with those ideas to find out if you are doing things better, which for me is not innovation, or are you doing things differently? And I think there's the whole sort of, there again, you have a part of the definition of innovation. I think real innovation does things in a different way. You might establish the same results, but the way that you achieve them is completely different from what anyone else, or at least what most of the people before you have tried and done before.
Yeah, yeah. So moving towards your job you're doing today, and I don't know how much you can share or are willing to share. I was fascinated when we have been on a call the other week where you said it's like how you use this way of innovation thinking in the business development of your current job, looking into the medical devices and so on. So can you explain things around that, or can't you share that?
No, sure. Yeah, I can share things around that. Yeah, let me give a little bit of background just to introduce that. What we have been doing over the last 15 years, I would say, we have, and I make it very simple, we have been making interactive user guides for electronic devices and mobile phones, really things on how to set it up, how to troubleshoot. Whenever you run into problems with your computer, your PlayStation or your iPhone, you go to the website of, for instance, a T-Mobile in Germany or Vodafone, and you'll find the answer, and that answer is made by us most of the times. So I thought, that capability of producing very user-friendly, interactive manuals that help people to help themselves, that we can apply that to many devices. And as things go, I had a business meeting at a large health insurance company in the US. And I found out that business is sort of ready for disruption. That's sort of the most old-fashioned business that I have ever seen in my life. And I thought I had seen a few.
Yeah, I was about to say that says a lot.
So I was like, wow, how's, and everybody knows the healthcare in the US is one of the most expensive healthcare industries in the world. And it's very, well, let's put it mildly, but it's not very well organized. And there are many players in there. So, but most of it, but in the end, it's really simple, right? There's someone who is the patient. There's someone who's the doctor or some other healthcare professional, and there's someone in between that's paying the bills. In the end, of course, you are paying the bills, but you do that through an insurance most of the time. So these three actors, they all have their own problems and challenges. But through that, I came into contact with a manufacturer of blood glucose monitors, and that are basically ways to test how high your glucose level is. Most diabetes patients know a lot more about that than I do, but it's really about measuring your blood glucose, and depending on the level, you either have to take a medicine, insulin, or you have to, eat or have a rest or go out and exercise. And that has always been done in a very old-fashioned way, where you have to sort of really measure your blood. So you have to make a little finger prick and then use that blood and put it on some tissue and then measure that. That became a little bit more modern when you could do it in a device. But nowadays, these devices are sort of, yeah, they have these patches that stick in your arm and that have a sensor which is constantly connected to an app. So I thought, wow, here we have a device. um, Again, it looks a lot like a mobile phone, but it's just doing one thing. But it's a very important thing. It's something where you think I should be able to trust it. I should be able to use it all the time. I make decisions for my well-being, even for my health, based upon how well that device is functioning.
Mm.
So the importance is becoming much bigger. Although a mobile phone is already sort of unmissable, this is even one step beyond. Um, and so when I became aware of that, I started what I started just to find lots of evidence for myself, like, hey, how important is it? How does this patient journey work? How do all the things work? And I started to advocate that within that company and say, hey, we have to develop a new industry. We have a new market that we need to go to, and it's still developing. It's still sort of like low, but everybody knows that it's one of the largest industries in the world, healthcare, right?
Mm.
I think 17% of the national product of the US is spent on healthcare. So it's by far the largest industry in the US. Um, and so I brought that together, right? We have this large industry. We have, it's old fashioned. Um, Insurance companies are looking more and more at the value of the care, right?
Mm.
Because they pay for it. Patients are getting used to things like Apple Watches, Fitbits, and they start measuring their own fitness and their own health.
Mm.
And there's doctors sort of in between that, of course, want to provide help, but also, um, especially during the COVID time, do not have the ability to see you a lot of times, at least not in person. So everything's virtual anyway. And that sort of became a perfect storm where I said, well, if this is happening, then we should focus on that market. We should look at how these Molochs of the healthcare industry, which a lot of pharma and medical device companies are. They're also old-fashioned companies. They have
Mm.
always worked in the same way. They have almost never done any direct consumer communication because most of these things were done by pharmacies, by doctors, by hospitals. And I thought, well, that's an interesting development. And so I've pitched that. I've just pitched that. I wrote propositions. I wrote articles, blogs. I recently published a CX report on the support websites of all these large medtech companies, just to sort of set the stage to have the ability now to spend our investments on that.
Mm.
So it's about storytelling. It's about getting people to believe in it. That's what set it in motion. And it still took me, I think, about 9 months and a client. So we have our first client. We're now working on a second one. But I think that was needed to get this innovation. We didn't have it on our radar a year ago. We had plans for other things that some of them we're still pursuing. But this was sort of like almost an old-fashioned innovation idea, right? So when you have a product, you can try a new product with the same customer base, or you can try the same product in a new market, or you can try a new product in a new market. Well, we didn't do the last thing, right? That's usually not a wise thing to do. But I just chose that sort of that area and invested in a lot of time in getting people to believe in that idea. I think that's what I do nowadays. It's almost like sort of an evangelist within that company, making people believe in something.
And it's fascinating, specifically how you explained that there's a lot of your experience from iterations, from prototyping, goes all into that.
Yeah.
So what you learned in running your own business years back and failing and trying it, it's like all of these things are helping you to succeed in your business right now. That's always fascinating to see.
I think what's good about it is, and that's sort of a personal lesson that I learned. Like, when I was I was not alone, but when I was alone, when I had my own company, when I had my own people, I could go very fast, right? But it did not always bring me very far. And now I go much slower
Mm.
compared to the companies I had before. But my reach is bigger. So it doesn't mean I do less. I just do different things to establish that reach. I need to um, now I'm able because this company had a lot of clients already also in this area
Mm.
to pinpoint my ideas and pivot them with or pitch them with the right at the right levels, the right sort of direct to the right companies. So I didn't have to spend all that energy. I could really spend it on the idea,
Mm.
where previously I had the idea, but I also had a lot of time I had to spend on finding the right entrances or finding the right people, creating everything on my own, or at least with a smaller group with fewer capital. Right now we can say, okay, let's do this, and well, not now, but at least last year, beginning of last year, take a plane to California and visit a few companies. When I was on my own company, I was very cautious spending budget on travel.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Now that was not hindering me, or I could go to conferences. So I think both things work. You can do it from your own company, and but you have to spend more time on that sort of groundwork, that footwork that you have to do to get the reach, and that's something that I now have. I have more easy access to certain C-level or at least high-level people in companies and the right companies because I'm coming in from a different angle and I have more financial backing behind me,
Yeah.
so I can focus more on the idea.
Yeah. See that. So slowly getting towards an end, I have a couple of questions I'm asking everyone who is on the show. So imagine it would be possible for you to be part of a project or running a project that's impacting everyone on Earth. What would the project be, and why that project?
Wow. I'm inclined to say something around climate change, but but it's also again, no, it would be about positivity. The thing that and this is a very personal experience, the thing that I found over the last 5 years of my life, both personal as well as business, um, is that it's easy to get detracted from, or to get distracted, or to get even negative about things. You see that in politics, you see it on the social media, you see everywhere a lot of negativism, and that's it's a very powerful force. And so if I could find a project where people learn to think positive, to have an open view, to be open, to not judge people directly on things, but be open to go into discussion. Be open also, because openness works two ways. Be open to be honest to yourself and say, "Hey, I was wrong." Right?
Yeah,
You said
yeah.
something, and I always said it was A, and you said it was B, and you came with a good story, and now I changed my mind. So that I mean with positivism, trying to get people to think from that positive mindset and to think that, and it sounds almost spiritual and not very spiritual, but this is something that I found. If you're willing to listen, if you're willing to change your mind, if you're willing um, to accept that you're not always right, but you're right sometimes, and you're willing to accept that someone else is sometimes right, that would be a project that I would love to work on. So be positive, try to see, the well, not the light at the end of the tunnel, it's very dark, but at least see the good things because I think in the end, I think all people want the same. They want a happy life, happy family. We're basically all the same. So that's something I would like to work on. Positive mindset.
It's a great one. where will you be in a year from now? And you can answer that from a personal perspective or business or both.
Yeah, so in years, I think in a year from now, I'll probably be looking at a different business again. So I might still be working with that medtech because it's huge, but I might be exploring different areas of the healthcare industry. That's I think from a business perspective, and I'm also sort of looking at sort of new projects, not directly starting new businesses. I don't see that directly, but at least getting into new territory. So I've been advising a large concert hall here in the Netherlands, where I'm in the supervisory board. That gave me a lot of insight into that sort of music industry. I would like to pick another industry, and it could be anything from education to television to I don't know. And I want to learn more about a new industry, so that's something I have as a goal. I want to do something. I want to do something, right, and learn new people and learn new insights, new ways of working. So I'll probably be investing some time, and I think that's both business as well as private, because I only thrive when I grow personally, when I learn new things. So for me, that's really important.
Yeah, yeah. If you so it's like, how do you keep yourself up to date on things? How do you inform yourself? I was always fascinated when we met. I think it was in 2016, 17. You have so much incoming. At least at that time, you have been different perspectives, and of course, a lot of things are built over time. But it's also new stuff. How do you inform yourself? How do you keep yourself up to date?
Yeah, I don't think I have really changed since 2016. It's um, I'm I'm just an avid reader. So for me, I'm a reader and I'm very curious. So to give an example, if I read something about it, can be anything, but I just give one example. If I read something about a car, and they are comparing cars to each other, and I'm not a very big knowledgeable person on engines, for instance, then I read something and then I want to know how it works. So if it's about how big your car engine is, like the 2 liter or 1.6 liter, then I just dive into that and I just read like half a day or a day, everything about that. Not because I need it, I just want to know how it works. So finding out how things work. And sometimes you read about things you never use it at all, and then at some point in time you think, I read something about that a long time ago, and now finally I have this sort of fact that I could never use. It's also helpful in television shows because you always know the answers. But I never do television shows, only as a spectator. But yeah, I'm just very curious. I want to know how things work. So that brought me from starting up my own school, which we haven't even talked about, to starting on businesses, to diving into all these industries and being curious. I think that's mainly reading things, watching things, and to some point also talking to people, which has become a bit less over the last year, at least in person. So yeah, it's really about that curiosity.
How can people find you or reach out to you?
Yeah, they can find me, of course, on LinkedIn, right? They can find me on Twitter. They can find me basically through your LinkedIn. If they look up your profile, they can probably find me as well. Yeah. So yeah, that's it.
And any departing words, not words, from your side to the listeners, to the people watching?
Well, it's probably not famous last words, but at least I think if you, I think that positivity thing that I talked about 2 minutes ago, that sort of sticks with me. So whatever comes your way, whether it's personal or in business. There's this way of coping with it, and it can be a challenge. It can be an opportunity, both ways. Trying to look at it from a positive side is something that will help you either solve that problem or grow a business, right? I think that's also the true spirit of most entrepreneurs. Like, we could fill another show about failures, but if you're an entrepreneur, you will fail not so much in your business, but you will have a lot of failures growing your business, and that's where, if you're not able to cope with that because you're a more negative thinker, then work on that first, right? See always the opportunity in things, and I think that's where I want to end it. Like, be positive and try to find the opportunity in everything that's being thrown at you.
That's a great ending. Thank you very much, Seth, to be on the show.
Yeah.
Was a pleasure having you.
Same. Very nice to talk, and we'll definitely talk more in the future.
Definitely.
And maybe even on other shows.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Take
Bye.
care.
Take me to another place where the fairy tales don't end. Magical land, magical